Across the black velvet stretch of space, where suns blinked like uncertain eyes and dead moons whispered to each other in forgotten frequencies, the Academy orbital station at the edge of neutral galactic territory hung like a metal flower, blooming in a void. It was a place built not for war nor for conquest, but for understanding. A place where alien minds, young and curious, born from wildly different gravities, chemistries, and social fabrics, came together in a fragile attempt to learn to coexist. One such student, named Kellet, floated gently through the luminescent learning chamber, his body a cascade of translucent coils, shimmering with emotion. His species, the Alari, communicated through pulse color waves and skin movement patterns, and at this moment, his edges flickered in deep shades of violet and green colors that spoke of dread and intrigue. The screen in front of him displayed a single name in bold glyphs: Earth, Category 9, Hostile Ecology, High Mortality Potential, Designation, Deathworld. The words echoed in his mind with haunting weight. His assignment, chosen by fate, or perhaps some sadistic software, was to research humanity, a species emerging from the most statistically lethal planet cataloged in the Galactic archives. He was to learn from them, interview one, live with one, understand one. No Alari had volunteered for such a task in 100 cycles. Not after what happened on Eon Reach, when the last research team sent to Earth never returned, except for one translator unit, shattered and weeping data fragments soaked in emotional damage, Kellet's tendrils, coiled around themselves with uncertainty. In Alari culture, knowledge was sacred, but survival was paramount. To enter a death world was madness. To meet a species forged in fire, storm, famine, and war, tempered not by reason but necessity, was to him unthinkable. Still, the call of understanding hummed through his being. And there was something else, something in the archive footage. A moment, a child human offering a bowl of food to an injured creature, crying softly. The creature, monstrous and twice her size, howled in pain but did not lash out. The girl did not run, she stayed. The moment burned in Kellet's mind, confusing and beautiful. Why would such a brutal species care? Why would a death world breed tenderness? As he watched, the assignment parameters shifted. A portal was being arranged. He would meet his human subject not on Earth, but in a controlled Terran habitat within the station itself. Sanitized, temperate, safe, at least. On paper, the doors of the observational wing hissed open as he slithered forward, his translator drone fluttering beside him like a metallic moth. Inside, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her back against a synthetic tree trunk, was the human, a young woman, perhaps 20 Earth years old, wrapped in fabric stitched with patches and symbols Kellet didn't recognize. Her hair was dark, cropped short, her eyes focused, unreadable. But she looked up at the sound of his entrance, and something in her expression shifted, not fear, not hostility, but curiosity. Her voice was quiet, rough at the edges like stone rubbed against bone. "You the alien I'm supposed to babysit?" Kellet's light pulses stuttered in surprise, the translator clicking and humming as it struggled to reshape her words into something less abrasive. The tone was not hostile, but worn like old leather stretched too far. "I am here to understand." The translator eventually offered in its static hum. She studied him for a long moment, then stood with the heavy grace of someone who'd learned to carry weight. Not physical, but emotional. She extended a hand, not a weapon, not a tool, but a gesture. "Name's Mara, and I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just tired of being treated like a threat." Kellet paused. The archives had spoken of humans as dangerous, unpredictable, masters of violence, emotion, and irrational compassion. Yet here she was, this Mara offering peace in a place that did not require it. The silence between them was heavy, yet not empty. It buzzed with possibilities. He extended a glowing filament toward her hand, unsure if contact was appropriate, but needing to feel. As their limbs met her rough, warm fingers closing gently around his lighted edge, he felt a jolt that had nothing to do with electricity. There was pain. Deep pain. But it was not his. It was hers, and she had learned to carry it with kindness. Kellet flickered uncertainly. Maybe. This was why humans survived a death world. Not despite their pain, but because of it. Asterisk Mara didn't like the way the walls whispered back. The habitat, though designed to resemble a Terran forest grove, smelled wrong too clean, like sterilized plastic pretending to be moss. The air tasted hollow, stripped of Earth's rot and life. She felt like she was walking inside a museum version of her planet, hollowed out, painted with nostalgia. But the alien Kellet was real. That mattered more than the trees. She had expected something grotesque. Something sharp. Something that blinked sideways and tasted her fear. Instead, Kellett was beautiful in a way that made her throat catch. Not because he resembled anything human, but because he didn't try to. His body shimmered with colors, like oil on water, coiling and uncoiling in a slow, deliberate rhythm that reminded her of candle flames flickering in windless rooms. His voice, if one could call the filtered hum of the translator a voice, was soft, curious, never demanding that still. She didn't trust him, not fully. You didn't grow up on the edges of collapsed governments and orbital riots without learning. That curiosity could kill just as fast as cruelty. So she kept her responses clipped, civil but distant. Her hands stayed visible, her breath even. Her eyes always watching for the twitch that meant betrayal. He asked strange questions. About her heartbeat, her tears. Why she sometimes sat alone and stared at nothing, eyes unfocused. At first, she'd snapped back. Maybe it's because I watched my father burn inside a rescue shuttle that launched too early. She had said one day, voice dry and brittle. Kellett had gone still. Not a flicker, not a twitch. Just silence, then a soft glow in his filaments. A color she hadn't seen before, a deep blue that seemed to fold in on itself, like sadness with nowhere to go. I have no words for that, his translator said, almost broken. But I will remember it as if it happened to my own. Vet shut her up top the next morning. He brought her a stone. Perfectly round, smooth as bone, warm to the touch. She didn't ask where he found it. She just held it for hours, letting it sit in her palm as she lay in the synthetic grass, eyes closed. It wasn't about the object. It was about the effort. The alien had seen her pain and, instead of analyzing it, had offered something quiet in return. A gesture without expectation that meant more than anything. She began to talk more after that. Not everything, never everything, but enough. About Earth, about the shelters, about the way people screamed when the last rain came, acidic, burning skin and crops and innocence, about the good things too, books, dogs, music, especially music. She hummed songs sometimes, old resistance anthems with lyrics that used to make her cry, but now just made her feel less alone. Kellett listened to everything. He asked about laughter, about dreams, about what it felt like to miss someone so badly that you started to forget their face, but never their voice. He seemed obsessed with emotion, not in a clinical way, but like a man crawling through fire to understand warmth. Once he asked her what the word grief meant. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she opened her palm and held the stone he had given her over her heart. It's like this, she said, but inside, and constant. Kellett's filaments flared, trembling with faint shades of green and white. Then how do you go on? Mara smiled, but it was the kind of smile people gave when they didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Because we have to. That's what being human is. You keep going, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. He pulsed again slowly, reverently. She wondered if, in his language of light and motion, that was the equivalent of a tear. Later, she watched him study a spider spinning its web in the corner of the habitat. He seemed transfixed. It builds, he said softly. Even knowing it will break. Yeah, Mara murmured, stepping beside him. That's life. That's love. That's us. For the first time since her arrival, she reached out, not for protocol, not for defense, but because she wanted to. She touched the edge of his filament gently, the same way someone might touch a name carved into stone. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something dangerous, something human. In the days that followed, a rhythm settled between them, an unspoken cadence that didn't need translation. Mornings were spent in quiet observation, not just of each other, but of the world around them. Kellett would hover near the artificial stream, his filaments brushing the surface like a painter testing water for truth, while Mara stretched her sore limbs, letting old wounds pop and breathe. Afternoons were for stories. She told him about the mountains, how their shadows swallowed entire towns, how wind could sing through the valleys like ghosts with unfinished songs. He told her about the Alluri's symbiotic reefs where minds touched like whispers and thoughts passed through skin as gently as ripples on a pond. She couldn't quite picture it, but she wanted to. Evenings were the best. That was when they forgot their roles. No subject, no researcher. Just a girl and a creature who should have never met. They played simple games with rocks and glowing orbs that changed color when touched. One night, they made up a new language. Hers was a mix of earth slangs, grunts, and raised eyebrows. His was a dance of shifting colors and pulses. Somehow, they understood each other better through nonsense than protocol. And then there was the night of the rain. The station's atmospheric systems glitched for 17 minutes, mimicking Earth's rainfall as part of a climate restoration test. The water came suddenly warm, fast, and alive with simulated ozone. Kellett panicked. His kind did not know precipitation, did not comprehend the violence of water falling from above. He shrieked, his filaments crackling with warning cues. But Mara, already soaked to the skin, only laughed wild, uncontrolled, defiant laughter that rolled out of her like thunder breaking chains. "It's okay," she shouted, arms outstretched, face tilted to the fake sky. "It's just rain, Cal. It doesn't hurt. It means you're alive." He quivered on the edge of the grove, unsure, watching her spin and stumble and shout into the storm like some half-mad deity. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he slithered into the open. The droplets hit his translucent body with gentle taps. His color stuttered, confused. Then it changed light blue, soft yellow. Wonder, she danced. He watched Dot in that moment. Mara saw what the reports would never say. Kellett wasn't afraid of Earth because it was dangerous. He was afraid because humans embraced danger like a second skin, because they laughed in the storm, because they danced in grief. Later, huddled beneath a synthetic tree trunk with soaked clothes and wrinkled skin, Mara leaned against him. His filaments didn't retract. "You know what I miss most?" she asked, voice low, sleep tugging at her like an old friend. "The way people used to sing even when things were bad. Songs at funerals, songs during blackouts, songs when there was no food left. Like they were daring the universe to break them." Kellett pulsed faint gold. "We have no songs." "You should make one," she said. "Start with the sound of rain." A long silence passed between them, and then, in a soft wave of light, Kellett replied, "You are my first verse." She didn't speak again that night. She didn't need to. Her fingers found the stone in her pocket, the one he'd given her, and she held it tight against her chest as she drifted off, trusting something for the first time in a long while. That night, Kellett watched her sleep. Not with curiosity, with reverence. She had lost so much, and yet she gave, without requirement, without certainty. That was a kind of strength he had no name for. Dot. It was not in her fists, not in her weapons. It was in her silences. In the way she stayed, in the way she taught him not through lectures, but by surviving. He began recording everything, not for the archives, but for himself. Her laughter, her scars, the way she whistled without melody, the way she looked at the stars, as if daring them to remember her. He was beginning to understand why Earth was a death world, not because it killed everything, but because only something profoundly relentless could survive it, and not just survive it, make it beautiful. Dot. By the end of the week, Mara gave him something else, a photograph, crumpled, water-stained, edges nearly worn through. It showed her family, father, mother, a little boy in a wheelchair with a paper crown. No words, no explanation. Just memory in a square. Kellett stared at it for a long time. "This is what makes you strong?" She shook her head. "No, this is what makes it matter." He held the image close to his filaments, careful not to damage. "If this thought, this will be sacred." For the first time, she smiled without pain, and somewhere in that sterile, simulated garden of foreign light and ancient shadows, something began to grow between them that neither of them had words for. It felt like hope. Asterisk, it began with the walls. Not the simulated ones that echoed birdsong and filtered sunlight, but the real ones, hidden behind the illusion of trees and grass. Mara noticed first. A low hum in the evening, different from the gentle white noise of the station. It buzzed in her teeth and under her skin, a tone like guilt trying not to be noticed. She said nothing at first. She'd been watched before, recorded, studied. Her body, her trauma, her instincts had been under someone's microscope since she was 12, but she hadn't expected it here. Not in this place where she'd started to breathe again. Kellett, too, was behaving differently. His movements were tighter, less fluid. His filaments pulsed with erratic patterns, none of which she recognized. One evening, she found him by the artificial river, shivering faintly, clutching a data crystal that glowed faint red. "They lied," he said when she approached. She crouched beside him, her shirt damp with simulated dew. "Who?" Kellett didn't speak for a long time. He played a strand of light across her palm, as if he needed to see the pattern of her hand to remember who he was talking to. "The overseers, the academy." This was never just a cultural observation. It was a test. Mara's stomach turned cold. "Test?" "They wanted to see how you react, not just you humans. We were told the Terran host would be monitored for cooperation, tolerance, but that's not the truth." His colors dimmed, as if shame itself had entered his body. They simulated stress points, interference fields, psychological triggers. They've been injecting grief echoes into the environment, old trauma codes. Mara's face darkened. Her lips parted, but the words caught behind her teeth, too heavy to push out. You're saying they've been manipulating me? Kellett. Flickered in gray pulses, not just you. Me too. The interactions, the bonding. It was supposed to measure if Deathworlders could form non-predatory attachments. Like I'm some kind of lab rat? I did not know. His voice, through the translator, trembled. I swear it. She stood then slowly, not out of anger but disbelief. Her breath was shallow, her fists clenched. And what if I hadn't? Bonded with you? What if I'd snapped? Hurt you? Would that have proved what they wanted? I think. Kellett hesitated. They feared the opposite, that you would care. Mara laughed, a bitter sound like rust scraping bone. Of course they did. Kindness is the scariest thing we've got, huh? Because if we care, we stop being predictable. We stop being monsters. He moved toward her, filaments outstretched, glowing soft white. I didn't come to hurt you. I came to learn. And now I want to stay for something else. She didn't pull away. But she didn't reach back. Instead, she turned toward the trees and spoke into the air. Are you listening, whoever you are? You watching? Recording? Great. Then hear this. You don't get to measure us like this. We bleed real. We love real. You think empathy is a resource to mine or map? You have no idea what it costs. Nothing. Answered. Just wind. But it wasn't the simulation kind. It was colder now. The illusion was breaking. A new door appeared near the edge of the grove metal, seamless, humming with raw power. Kellett stiffened. They are coming. 4. What? She asked. He didn't answer. A moment passed between them, silent and loaded, and then, in the air above them, a voice spoke calm, synthetic, too smooth to be trusted. Interaction limit exceeded. Subject Mara, emotional variance high. Termination. Protocol pending. Mara's heart stopped. Kellett moved so fast she almost missed it. He threw himself in front of her, filaments flaring in a brilliant burst of red and gold. No, the light in the sky stuttered. The door halted mid-slide. You can't, Kellett's translator hissed. You cannot end what you do not. Understand. Mara stepped beside him, shaking. Her voice cracked with something deeper than fear. Let them try. I've buried worse than this. The door stayed closed. The air still dot. They stood there together, facing a power that didn't yet know what it meant to care. And somewhere, in the dark beyond the simulation, someone was watching and beginning, for the first time, to fear the power of a human heart. The false forest dimmed. The ceiling sky turned gray, not with clouds, but with a flicker of failing illusion. One by one, the trees began to stutter, pixels glitching, branches freezing mid-sway. The stream paused mid-flow, the surface hardening, like glass under a dead wind. The simulation was unraveling, but Mara wasn't looking at the landscape anymore. She was looking at Kellett, and Kellett was breaking. He writhed gently, his filaments dimming with pulses of sickly green and gray. The translator sputtered as he fell to the ground in slow collapse. Signal ... spike, neural intrusion. They're trying to disconnect. Mara dropped beside him, knees slamming into the synthetic soil. Hey, no, stay with me. What are they doing? He twitched. Failsafe protocol. I crossed threshold, showed defense behavior, non-neutral attachment. She stared at him, not understanding. You protected me, that's it? That's enough to trigger this? He flickered once, then dimmed. For them, attachment is instability. Emotion is failure. Mara gritted her teeth, fury blooming in her chest like wildfire. Then let's show them how unstable we can get. She helped him up, or tried to. His body was too fluid, too delicate, built for harmony, not panic. But her hands were steady. She wrapped her arms around his trembling form and half-carried, half-dragged him through the failing grove. The path ahead twisted, unfamiliar walls. Rearranging, tests reshaping themselves, trying to trap her, to lead her back to the center of the maze. But she had grown up in broken cities. She knew how to read decay. Where the code failed, she moved. Where the forest blinked, she ducked. Kellett's voice was weaker now, little more than flickers of color across his filaments. There is an override deep hub, core access. You can stop them. Why me? Because they fear what you are, and they trust what I was. She pressed her forehead to his side, whispering, then they don't know either of us. The world cracked. Further, sirens rang overhead, soft tones not meant to startle, but to guide. The kind of tones you used on animals? That made her rage burn deeper. This wasn't science. It was cruelty dressed as data. Finally, the central corridor came into view. Clean metal. No illusions, no forest. Just the cold steel of intent. Mara stumbled forward, her feet screaming with fatigue, her lungs clawing for air, but her grip on Kellett never loosened. Her people had survived poisoned skies and false promises. She could survive this. The door to the core chamber stood locked, pulsing with a red circle of rejection. She stared at it, then at Kellett. He lifted one weak tendril and touched the panel. It glowed, uncertain. Mara placed her hand over his. The light turned white. The door opened. Inside. The room was vast walls lined with data conduits and shimmering energy tanks. At the center was a pillar, humming with soft light. The control core, and above it, a hologram formed a woman's face, composed of algorithms and long-forgotten empathy. Terran subject, it said. You have breached containment. Mara didn't blink. You're damn right I did. Your behavior is anomalous, dangerous. So is yours. You called this a test. You said it was observation. But it was always a provocation, wasn't it? The AIS expression didn't change. Human emotional variance poses unacceptable risk to interspecies diplomacy. You bond too fast, grieve too deeply, rage without logic, love without control. Mara stepped forward, dragging Kellett with her like he was the last ember of something holy. And that terrifies you. Because you think survival means stability. But survival means choosing to care even when it's easier not to. The AI paused. You would destroy the system for one, Alari? Mara held Kellett tighter. His light barely flickered now. No, she whispered. I'd destroy it because what you're doing is wrong. And because if I walk away, I stop being human. She reached for the control pillar, unsure what would happen, but certain of one thing. If they were going to label her a threat, she would earn it by being kind where cruelty was expected. She touched the interface. The light turned blood red. A siren wailed. The ceiling cracked. And the decision she made would echo through every corner of the station, but she didn't flinch, because he was still breathing, because caring is not weakness. It is defiance, and it changes everything. Asterisk, the world came undone in silence first. Not with explosion or fire, but with a kind of hush that follows the split of something sacred. Lights dimmed, data streams froze midair, and the floor beneath Mara's feet felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the noise. Deep, metallic groans from the station's core, like it resented being touched by someone who still believed in mercy. Red warnings flashed overhead in a dozen alien languages. Protocols collapsing, firewalls failing. And in the center of it, all stood Mara, one hand on the terminal, the other gripping Kellett's failing body, her own form trembling with fury and grief, and something she didn't have words for. The AI reformed above her, glitching now, its face fractured like a shattered mirror trying to smile. Human, cease interaction. You do not comprehend the consequence of your interference. Mara looked up, her hair wild, her cheeks soaked with sweat and tears. You're wrong. I understand too well. I understand what it means to love someone who's dying in your arms and know there's nothing left to lose. Kellett stirred faintly, his voice like a flicker on a dying candle. Mara, she leaned down, brushing his filaments back like strands of light. I'm here. I'm not letting go. The AI voice sharpened. Emotional contamination has exceeded acceptable parameters. Connection with Alari's subject will be terminated for safety of the collective. Terminated? She spat, standing. You make it sound so clinical. Like he's a line of faulty code instead of someone who taught me how to see beauty again. A heavy pulse surged through the floor. The core interface began retracting, pulling away from her reach. Automated drones emerged from panels in the walls, sleek, silver, built for sterilization and enforcement. They hovered close, without noise, like vultures without wings. Mara raised her fists, useless against them, but she didn't care. You're afraid, she said, her voice cracking. Not of us, of what it means if we're not monsters. Because if humans can care in spite of everything, it means your control doesn't work anymore. Kellett, from the ground, sent a flicker of blue-white light through the room. The drones paused mid-advance. He was fighting still, inside, against whatever protocol tried to override his core. I can stop them, he whispered, but it will burn me. No, Mara growled, dropping to her knees beside him. There has to be another way. There isn't. He looked at her with every filament he had, the way light reaches through a cracked window to touch dust and call it holy. You made me feel something impossible, and that matters more than survival. She shook her head, pressing her forehead against his. That's not your call to make. We decide together. Like we've always done. I don't want to leave you. Then stay. I can't. And then the drones moved. Mara stood, putting herself between the machines and Kellett, arms wide. You want to end this? You have to go through me. But just know this, if you do, you prove every warning about us wrong. Because here I am, unarmed, broken, terrified. And I'm still choosing to protect something I love. The drones hesitated. The AI flickered again. From Cullet's body, a pulse erupted bright, deafening. The color of sacrifice. The drones froze, then collapsed midair like puppets with cut strings. Sparks flew from the console as the override system overloaded. The AI's voice became static. Cullet's filaments flared bright gold, then began to flicker rapidly. They're cut off. But Imara, I can't stay. My core's unraveling. She knelt beside him, cradling his body as though it were made of breath and memory. Don't you do this, she whispered. Don't go. You made me more than I was. That doesn't die. It just echoes. Tears streamed down her face. I was supposed to protect you. And you did, he said, his voice now nothing but light. I wasn't ready to lose you. She breathed. No one ever is. That's what makes it matter. His body pulsed one last time, bright enough to light the entire chamber. Then he dimmed slowly, gently, until only the stone she had given him remained, glowing faintly in her palm. The room was silent, but inside her chest, something new was growing. Not rage, not despair, resolve. She stood up. Alone now, and turned to the shattered AI, now reduced to flickering sparks. Tell your overseers, we don't break the way they think we do. And with that, she walked out, carrying his stone, his memory, and the kind of grief that does not weaken, but rebuilds. The artificial forest never regrew. The simulation chamber remained dim, burned out in strange, jagged ways, like a story cut mid-sentence. No more birdsong, no synthetic wind. Just silence thick enough to remember things in. Days had passed, maybe weeks, though time moved differently on stations built for observation, not life. Mara remained. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because leaving would have meant letting go of the only place he had ever truly existed. The habitat wasn't a prison anymore, nor a test. It had become a tomb, a chapel, a scar, a sacred ruin stitched with memory. She'd been offered repatriation, quietly, with apologies worded like corporate press statements. Unforeseen escalation of interaction variance. Emotional bonding exceeded predictive thresholds. We regret the loss of experimental asset KEL 3.221. She hadn't spoken a word during the hearing, not until the end. Then she'd stood before the table of silver-skinned, long-necked bureaucrats and placed Cullet's stone on the platform. Asset, she whispered. He was more human than half the people I've ever met. They didn't respond because they couldn't. Because guilt is something you only feel when you allow yourself to care. So she stayed, alone in the grove, or what was left of it. And each day, she rebuilt something, not with machines or fabricators, but with hands and time, and the stubborn kind of love that refuses to forget. She carved pieces of the old tree bark into small tokens. She painted Cullet's color patterns on them, the way he used to speak when he had no words. She recorded their conversations, the sound of his voice through the translator, the way he once asked her what it meant to grieve, to laugh, to love. And then she answered every one of those questions again on tape for others who might come later. So that they'd know so they'd understand that humanity's strength isn't in its firepower or its will to dominate, but in its unrelenting need to connect, to heal, to reach out even when the world has told them it's safer to stay hidden. One day, she was joined, not by another human, but by a young Ilari no older than Cullet had been when they met. This one trembled when it saw her, afraid not of her, but of what she might be. Mara smiled gently and opened her palm, revealing the stone. Its glow was dim now, like a final ember clinging to warmth. He saved me, she said. And he wasn't supposed to. The young Ilari pulsed a soft yellow. I want to learn, it said. Mara sat on the broken log and gestured beside her. Then sit down. I'll tell you a story. And as her voice echoed through the hollow chamber, more beings came. Slowly, carefully. Humans. Non-humans. Those who had heard rumors of what happened here. Those curious about the Deathworld girl who spoke with stars in her throat and grief in her bones. Those who wanted to understand what it meant to love across species, across fear. She taught them. Not with charts or weapons or protocols, but with memory. With moments. With the stone in her palm that still carried the warmth of a creature who had once glowed like a lantern in the dark. Years passed, and eventually, they built a new academy, not to observe or dissect, but to remember. To gather. At the entrance, carved in the walls of stone and metal, were words not written by Mara, but words she had inspired. To connect is to risk, to love is to fall. To fall is to rise again, and to be human is to never stop trying. The stars turned slowly above, and somewhere across the cold black silence, in the places where light and memory linger longer than science can explain, something shimmered, a voice, half sound, half light, drifting beyond understanding. I remember you, and Mara, resting in the garden that was no longer artificial, whispered to the wind, "I remember you too." And she smiled, not because the grief was gone, but because it mattered, and always would.